Glad to be here, and it's fantastic to also have a couple of connections back to Civic Action through folks like Gabe and Howard, who we've known for a while through our work. For the presentation today, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to tell you about Civic Action. There's lots that I can say, a lot of past initiatives that I can share, but I'll just skim over a couple, and if you have a couple of minutes at the end and you have other questions, please feel free to jump in. I wanted to highlight in particular one special project that we just did with LinkedIn recently and share a bit of that. And at the end, I'm going to take a few minutes to share that's actually the original reason that Gabe invited me to join this group. I had a chance to attend Code for America this year at the end of September, so I wanted to just share a few highlights on that and see if it inspires any ideas for the group of you here. So about Civic Action, we're a nonprofit organization that focuses on a range of urban issues in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. And we do this by taking what we think is a unique approach. We try to function at the intersection point of business, government, nonprofit, labor, and community partners, and try to offer a neutral sandbox. In some ways I see a parallel to what you folks are doing here, but offer a neutral sandbox for people and organizations that bring different perspectives to work together, identify gaps or opportunities in the region, and then pull together partners to clearly define a problem, identify potential solutions, and then actually work together to get some of those solutions off the ground. Actually, TRIAC, we had a connection to TRIAC from a number of years ago. That's a great example of the work we try to do as more of an incubator, where we will get things going, but then we will let projects go off, and perhaps they get absorbed by other organizations, they turn into new organizations, or perhaps the need for that given initiative is done. So we're very much focused on looking for where's there a concrete gap that we can help fill, and where can we do so with our special set of assets or skills, and where we feel like perhaps our role isn't the best fit, we'll move on. So, in addition to all of that cross-sectoral collaboration, one really important element of our work is engaging both established and emerging leaders, so that we have a diverse group of leaders that we work with. Some of you might be interested in some of our work with our Emerging Leaders Network, which also offers a very organic way for people to connect, network, find potential collaborators, and start up projects. You can find it more on our website. So before I share what we did most recently with LinkedIn, I wanted to give you some background on how we got there, and in sharing this example, illustrate a little bit of our model. So we have been working on an initiative called Escalator, Jobs for Youth Facing Barriers, which has been all about engaging private sector partners to play a more active role, more collaborative role in creating mentoring and employment opportunities for young people who face multiple barriers to employment. So we know we have a lot of great success in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto area, on employment and helping people develop themselves and achieve great careers, but we also know that there's so many members of our community who are left behind and who don't have access to opportunities that they should have. And we know that the private sector has a huge role to play. So a couple of years ago, we identified that therein was an opportunity. While there was a lot of work around youth employment, there wasn't quite at that time a coordinated approach to bringing private sector leaders and organizations to the table. We did a fairly extensive research and consultation process, had roundtables and interviews in total reaching 800 people across the region, from youth to employers to community partners. We looked at examples of I think around 100 initiatives in Canada and the US that involved the private sector, and looked at what might be the right fit here. And then through our consultations with partners here, we identified 3 main priority areas for us to look at. And those drew us in, interestingly, to both the world of tech skills as well as to LinkedIn. So we looked at, one, how can we promote skills development. We partnered with an organization called Empower Canada. If any of you aren't familiar with it, I encourage you to look it up. It's fantastic. It started in the US, and we helped them establish a Toronto office and Toronto program. What they do is provide entry-level IT training for young people who have faced or overcome various barriers to employment. It's both a skills development, they add on professional development, soft skills, other supports, and then help them move either into post-secondary or into further employment. So we saw that as a great model of, how do you deliver a program that's not just about training, but it's about really connecting people to a pathway for employment, and in particular focuses on an area in demand, which was tech skills. We also wanted to look at the question of transparency of the labor market, and we saw technology as providing a potential solution. So for those of you who might have a background in employment, you might know that many people complain about the labor market statistics that are available. We have very high level analysis, very high level LMI, but there are two challenges. One, often there aren't actual there isn't information collected, analysis done at a level, more practical level, that's sort of between high level, census information and annual labor force surveys and anecdotes on the ground. And at the other gap is taking some of this information and translating it into something that's practical and useful, and I think some of you are working on similar challenges. So we started working with LinkedIn, mostly to help engage community partners and young people to take advantage of LinkedIn as a dominant platform here, a tool that can help them understand the labor market. But we also saw that over time, platforms like LinkedIn had the potential to provide insights on supply and demand of jobs and skills that our traditional labor market statistics don't have. And then we had an amazing opportunity actually to collaborate with them on looking to see exactly what they could do. So the turning point moment was we had already been working with LinkedIn for a number of months, more at a grassroots engagement level. And the CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, had his first trip to Canada, sort of 24-hour whirlwind visit. In addition to visiting and meeting with business leaders and client types, we also co-hosted a roundtable with the LinkedIn Toronto office and brought together the cross-section of players that we typically work with, like someone from RBC, someone from the provincial government, someone from Seneca College, and learned that LinkedIn actually was starting to tap into some of its big data, and we all were excited. They saw that we already had a cross-sectoral group together, and then we decided to launch into this collaborative project. So just to give some highlights, I won't go through too many of the details. This information is available online. Happy to send you guys the link as well. Last Wednesday, we had an opportunity to announce some of these findings at the LinkedIn office with the mayor. And just to give you a little bit of background, lots of interesting projects they're doing. They call it the economic graph, their way of mapping economic opportunity through the activity they're seeing on their platform. And they have a vision that as they expand their reach globally, they'll be able to tell you more and more about the economy. And what was particularly exciting is that LinkedIn has amazing penetration in Canada, 11 million users, and just in the GTA, 1.9 million members. So an amazing and fascinating data source to work with. And they were working primarily with member data. So in a sense, it's crowdsourced data, self-reported, lots of limitations, lots of caveats, but the first time we had a chance to look at it. And we asked them to look specifically at tech skills, an area that we know will be in growing demand, and discovered that there are of the 1.9 million members, 214,000 report tech skills. And what does that mean for us, as a region? Well, when they looked at a number of comparator cities, as a proportion of the total membership, that was pretty good. And I should just back up by saying the reason why they are doing this kind of research, all pioneering and very early stage and partnering with organizations like Civic Action and governments in the US, is because they'd like to see how the data that they have available can be used to help close the skills gap and create opportunities for others. So I'll just skip through here, but just a couple of the highlights. There's a bit of a sector breakdown, and what many of you probably already know from your first-hand experience, we really see an incredible distribution of people with tech skills in industries outside of technology. Here, just an example of some of the common tech skills that they have people reporting. I think actually what we learned through our research is that it's a current contemporary challenge to have up-to-date taxonomies or analysis of what skill clusters are when it comes to tech skills. You probably know this from an employment perspective, but when you put it in a workforce development perspective or policy perspective, and you're thinking about what are those groups of skills that are emerging, it's very difficult to keep on top of. We had a bit more analysis of just going further and discovering that Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, is actually a fantastic place, it appears, to start a career in tech. Disproportionately high number of tech jobs are in early career roles. You can see almost 11,000 companies, just of those that are on LinkedIn, currently employ people with tech skills in early career roles. And we're seeing, if you look at people who are in early career tech roles, again, a very strong distribution across all sectors. They also, very interestingly, this is a little bit more difficult to really map towards a skills gap, but they were able to infer demand around these top 11 skills, finding that this group, people who had this skill group were starting new jobs at a higher rate. So in the last 12 months, something like 1 in 3 people who had mobile development as a tech skill that is on their profile actually changed jobs. That is a potential signal of demand. So that's just in a snapshot, in a nutshell, some of the insights we got. We actually brought a number of community partners like YMCA, who do job counseling on the ground, other researchers, and had a sort of dual level process on this. One, to say, okay, if you actually start having a conversation around what tech skills are, what we have in supply, what potential areas of demand might be, what would that mean for you on the ground? Does that mean you'll encourage youth to take different programs for the colleges? Does it mean you'll change some of your curriculum for employers? Does it mean you'll want to collaborate more to ensure that we're building a pipeline of these skills? And we're also at the same time reflecting on, well, this, as our first experience using this kind of big data source, what does it mean to us? So that's just that piece. What we're going to do next on this is actually take it out of the analysis and bring it to employers and have some cross-sectoral roundtables to see how people respond. What else do they have to add to that, so we can marry that and produce some new insights. In my last couple minutes, just want to share on Code for America. Has anyone here been? No. It was super cool. I enjoyed it so much. And I went because LinkedIn, we were working with the research team that's based in San Francisco. They invited us to participate and sit on a panel to share this work that they were doing with us. In addition to Toronto, they're working with something like 30 cities across the US, a few more in the UK and Europe, and they're just excited to share how they've been able to partner to promote upskilling. So just wanted to share, I'm not sure if this group here has considered organizing other conference type activities here, but these were the themes. You can see quite a range, 3 days, dynamic format. At Civic Action, we organize a lot of events, so I really admired them for their event design and event coordination. If anyone wants to know more about that, happy to chat more about that. When I was chatting with Gabe before coming here, we talked about just highlighting some of the particularly exciting and inspiring things. Code for America has done an amazing job. All of their videos are up online. They have these blog summary updates. Like, there's tons of stuff there, almost too much. A couple of favorite moments were the mayor of Oakland, who opened up the conference and talked about tequity. That was a term that really resonated with the audience, really thinking about how technology can be used to promote equity. And was sharing how they are already skipping over thinking about how to make the city accessible, technologically speaking, and thinking already around mobile and trying to say, can we have a mobile first policy? So really neat. And the CIO at the City of Boston, totally fascinating, amazing. If you want to bring him here, I think he'd be really neat. He came from a startup or a tech world and seemed to really embrace the city environment. Just wanted to highlight a couple of other neat examples that they shared. I think one of the really fun things about Code for America is that in addition to panels, they have a lot of opportunity just to feature things that people are doing. You probably all know that one of the key things that Code for America does is they recruit fellows who get tasked as teams to partner with a government or a public body somewhere in the city, and that team goes and works with that group to work on something. So they had scattered throughout all of these really neat examples, and not to say that those projects were completed, but they were just sharing what was the process, how did they understand their client's perspective. There was one great story, say, from the school board. So how did they talk to the teachers and the principals, understand what the challenges are, and then help them design some tools that could help them. So this was a great example, Get CalFresh, which is actually about providing food stamps and food-related supports to low-income families. And they did a whole analysis of how people actually got on, like all the forms they needed to fill, forms that they needed to print out, fill out, fax back, all the moments where if people didn't call back at the right time, they would get dropped from the list. So they went through and did a really tried to do an interesting design of how a lot of this service could be done by app, much more intuitively, giving people an opportunity to ask, doing a lot of things like automating reminders, like it's onto a phone, like it's your time, if you want to be stay eligible, you have to call in to this number now. So a really neat, great example. Another example that I loved, the simplest thing ever, called City Voice, where to do public consultations instead of, we've had, I'm sure you folks are all familiar with the Dave Meslin kind of critiques of how public consultations work, but just an example, how do you make it even more accessible? They would put up signs. Let's say there was a park that they needed to redesign. They would put up a sign and say, do you want to comment on this park and what we're going to do here? Just call this number. And all it is behind the scenes is a phone survey. So they would create like an introduction, and how cool, like they played a recording. So you would dial in and it would be like the Commissioner of Parks, her own voice, I can't remember which city they piloted in, saying, we really want to hear your view, this is what we're planning to do. And then go through a set of questions, and people could record with their own voices, their feedback, and then the team behind the scenes could compile that, treat it like a survey, but then also have those very powerful, real voices, like virtually no cost. Just a really neat idea. Some other exciting stuff that I observed was they had a speaker from Gov Tech Fund, and I was also actually very curious to hear what you guys thought, because the way one of the speakers there they really distinguished Gov Tech versus Civic Tech, but I feel like here you guys kind of merge it together, but Gov Tech really being about how to help government be more accessible, Civic Tech much more about how you have citizens engaged and empowered to have a voice. So, to see that wave of a venture fund supporting GovTech, interesting. Is this something, for example, that you guys are familiar with, this kind of GovTech fund? Obviously very US focused, but I think it points to directions that would come up in the future. We won't go through this because we're pretty much out of time, but some interesting things if we were to think collectively of what are some opportunities to spark more change. I'm not a tech person at all, so think more about what are some of our levers for change here in the region. Some very interesting examples of cities that were bringing data and OpenGov into the government in a super structured way, like an Office of Data Analytics. Like that's really neat. City of San Francisco, which is a leader in open data, also offering tons of training and capacity building to their own employees through a data academy to help people understand how they could use data. And then from a civic perspective, what other opportunities are there to collaborate, bring out some of the talent and that is in the room today in structured ways to partner with other organizations, or where would there be an opportunity to do something as bold as the Smart Chicago Collaborative? Is that what it's called? Smart Chicago? Which has just over time, generated so much interest, but then been elevated to include, marry both the grassroots as well as kind of government decision makers. So all possible opportunities for GTA. That's it.
Wow. So just a few minutes for questions, and yet there's so much to talk about there. Since I'm the Master of Ceremonies, I'm going to ask the first question. One of the things I'm interested in is that you've talked about roundtables and sort of pursuing things, and my general impression is that Civic Action has the support of, you might say, leaders of the various sectors that you talked about in Toronto, and therefore you have access to all that with that perspective, with potentially the resources and the policy making influence that's available. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. As an organization, if you want to learn more, you can find out quite a bit on our website. So if you looked actually at our board, we have individuals on our board who are there because they're passionate civic leaders, but they also bring the perspective of their organization. So we have the Toronto Region Board of Trade, we have Toronto, we don't have a regional government in the GTA, so it's an opportunity for other organizations that have a regional focus to come together. For each of our initiatives, what we do is actually establish a leadership group, like a champions council or a steering committee. That will be another group of people. So let's say on the escalator file that I mentioned, we have another 30 individuals, including youth, including nonprofits, including some business leaders. So for each project, we try to recruit and engage leaders at different levels to guide and participate. And then have, like the roundtables I was describing, have other opportunities for people to just join in and provide input in one way or another. And then the Emerging Leaders Network is a even more open and accessible group that people can just join in.
So much interesting. Okay, so let's just have a couple of quick questions. Any burning questions for anyone? Howard?
How would you distinguishing between Gov Tech and Civic Tech? Like, is it just no involvement from the public, or I was trying to understand that?
Yeah, I guess because the conference was so much about what government can do, and that was what was neat. The energy was a lot of the people who were there from government they're on the vanguard, right? Like they're already promoting technology. There was an incredible undercurrent around equity and inclusion, so they all are there. And so I think they saw it more like if they were a government actor trying to change government, or if there was some intervention that was trying to bring technology to government, even if it was coming from the outside, it would be ultimately so government could provide better services.
Is it just sort of government managed projects as opposed to externally managed, or
I think it was solutions that changed how government worked.
Okay.
Versus Civic Tech, which was changing how citizens participate. So there's some overlap, but I just made notes. I was like, I don't really know what Gov Tech is.
Anybody else?
I'm scared.
How does Civic Action deal with the, hi, I'm from the government, trust me?
Approach.
That whole kind of notion of, don't worry about it, we're from the government, we'll look after you.
Right. Well, a lot of our philosophy as an organization is, we're our whole organization, 12 people. So we have a whole message around government can't do anything alone, and only through collaboration will we get results that will achieve the full impact we want and that will bring diverse perspectives together. But a lot of our work, it is supported by the government for particular initiatives. So I think it's about partnering and helping identify where there are opportunities to help align with government priorities that might exist. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm curious about whether Civic Action is opening or helping to open government to make it participatory as opposed to we'll look after it. Just don't worry about it. Go about your business. We'll take care of it.
Yeah, I think I guess on two levels. One is in the traditional consultation level, like most nonprofit organizations, where we have an opportunity to weigh in like other organizations on budgets or things like that. We will or volunteer on committees that governments have organized. We also take advantage of the opportunity to actually bring, say, our emerging leaders, network members who might not be immediately tuned in to here's a consultation opportunity, and expose them to that. We've done things like roundtables with ministers when legislation is being reviewed. So to the extent that we can be a bridge to weigh in and bring voices, I guess a lot of our experience has been that people welcome those opportunities. Sometimes we find through our work that some organizations, like private sector companies, might actually prefer to participate with a nonprofit neutral civil society organization rather than with government. So sometimes we can actually help spark more participation with government, but indirectly.
One more, anybody else? So, okay.
How much confidence do you have in building a game study, and how do you collect, check the results with the other studies?
Yeah, so myself, I've reviewed quite a bit of other labor market information, and we brought in some researchers. So I think that when we had the opportunity to really talk about the methodology. So if you come into it with all of the limitations of the data, which they're very open about, you're sort of saying here is a way of holding up a mirror to the membership and what they're reporting and analyzing that. I think that I have a lot of confidence in what that represents. If you were to say, is this data a mirror of society? Then you would say, well, to a certain extent, you could see, I would definitely not say that's the case, but it provides clues and context, and given the gap in that tier of research and analysis that is talking about skills, there's very little that analyzes based on skills versus on occupations. That is all very new and I think very, very worthwhile to take a look at, but I wouldn't, probably like any source of data. I think some of the big lessons around drawing from big data means nothing without context, so we need that context around it provided by civil society programs. And I think it shows a lot of opportunity for us to go take this back to people who are operating on the ground and say, like, add to this.
Cindy, thank you so much. Obviously, thank you. Obviously, we could gainfully